Okay, great. Cool. Different place. Okay, welcome to our first strategic planning committee meeting. We're gonna have some good discussion today and also some learning, and this is really helping us to create our jumping off point for the working groups to get moving and for us to get our work in order as far as what we're going to be doing over the next few months. Thank you so much for being a part of this. So I wanted to start out with what our agenda looks like for today. We're, kicking off. We're gonna also talk a bit about, we're gonna be talking about the strategic and versus operational work that we'll be doing, the planning process and the roles. We're going to talk about some results from working backwards in the process, and then what our group needs from the working groups to do what we're going to do. We're also going to do a bit of work around process and visioning so we can start building that end game idea from the context of this committee. And then looking at what does launching the working groups look like. Many folks on this group are working group leads. Also refining the process and the calendar, and then just doing a little closing meditation to close this out. So any questions about the agenda? Okay, cool. If we just scroll down a bit, Elizabeth, to the blue box, I call it the blue page. Some of the agreements, it's not blue, it's actually burnt orange, which is very exciting. Just as a reminder about some of the agreements in this process, our values, of course, are there. We've got I statements, trust, whatever, how you ever want to interpret that for yourself. Being open to discomfort, listening to understand, seeking to understand intention, and then taking responsibility for our impact and recognizing our biases as we do this work together. So those are agreements. And then we're going to roll back up to doing a little bit of just a clarification, I think, of what we're going to do next, which is what are strategic planning, what's strategic planning work, and what is operational work in the context of this group. And if people have questions at any time, I will be watching for your tiny hands in the corner and or your actual hand, which could also be small or big, whatever you'd like to do. Exactly. Please ask questions as much as anybody would like. So if you scroll down to the very first page, the work we're going to do in this group is really culminating the information, coming together, bringing it together, the information, the suggestions from the working group, plus our own thoughts and impressions. There are people who are unique to this committee that are not on a working group, so we want to make sure everybody's voices are heard in this process. And that this work is really about creating priorities and goals towards those priorities. And we're keeping the reason that strategic work is important in juxtaposition to operational work is that things change, as we've learned so starkly over the past few years. We can keep a strategic plan that is based on priorities and goals in motion, even through changes in environment and external things. There's a degree to which that could be too much, i.e. pandemics can happen. But I think most part, we want to be able to build those operational plans as we move because we want to make sure we're keeping flexible and open with having strategic priorities and then goals that are associated with them. And the goals will be set for each year and things of that nature. And those operational plans will be made annually in conjunction with budgeting and financial planning. So, are there any questions about the differences between these two factors? Okay. If you just cruise down just a little bit, Elizabeth, to the bottom of this page. Just a touch. And again, you've all seen this timeline in packets and whatnot, but just to kind of keep in mind that this work is going to be done over the next few months. And we will meet again in June after this meeting, with hopes that the working groups will have time to put work into their specific focus areas and come back together for us to come back together with actual data and information to go forward with. Okay, great. Okay. So any questions about that? Okay. Elizabeth, you want to talk about planning process and roles?
Super. I think you've hit on key parts. So when we think about the roles of the board and the staff, we're really creating an engaged partnership process here. We know that it is, like, from this piece up here, the governance responsibility of the board to set the strategic direction, and in the spirit of Camp Stevens' approach, that is being done in partnership with staff and informed by staff. I mean, the board provides that guidance, but relies on staff for the day-to-day knowledge and operations and the wisdom and all the research that you're doing and bringing. And so we talked about how the staff will lead the operational pieces. In the groups that we have here, the strategic planning committee role is integrating the input that we gather from throughout. The responsibility for adopting the plan remains with the board. The board has not delegated that role or job to the strategic planning committee, but this is a place that's so helpful to be able to bring together all kinds of perspectives and be able to shape the information in ways that are most effective. So we'll be working together to develop and draft materials, respond to materials that emerge from the working groups, and find how they fit together. Do you want to talk, Kathy, a little bit about COTD? Does that fit here? Because we've got some representation here, and that's an important part of the process.
Okay, I'm not going to be that mute person. There you go. Okay, so so the Corporation of the Diocese is basically like the standing committee of, or the board of the Diocese of LA. They have a kind of an interesting structure. Whereas in San Diego, Charlie, correct me if I'm wrong, the standing committee kind of acts as the board for the Diocese of San Diego. So just different structures, different strokes for different folks, right? So the Corporation of the Diocese, because of our relationship to the Diocese of LA and their level of engagement and interaction and responsibility with Camp Stevens, they have created a little task force for us from members of the Corporation of the Diocese, which makes a lot of the big calls as far as financial support and prioritization goes. So we have 3 people that are on that task force. Rachel Nybeck, who is she'll be an advisor for this committee. She is the rector of St. Cross in Hermosa Beach, and also just a member of this board. Mary Pearson will be also a part of this process, and again as an advisor. And then I'm gonna boof right now and not remember Charlotte's last name, but we also have someone named Charlotte who will be a part of this process. And they all have a lot of great business experience, real estate experience, and also work within and commitment to organizations that are connected to the Episcopal Church. So they will be a part of this in an advisory role, mostly because I really like and Rachel will be seeing this recording, but I like them to have pre-buy-in to all the work that we're doing, and I'm doing some extra work with them on the side, so that when we come to the Corporation of the Diocese, they will be there not only for just to give their rubber stamp of approval, but that they can really see the time and energy that went into this through the eyes of their very own members that were a part of this. So that it's an unusual step. It's not necessarily the normal step, but it's part of our process in this work. So does anybody have any questions about that?
And welcome, Stephanie. Good to see you.
Yay.
Glad you're here. Aria, that looked like a wave. Yes, not a, yep, no pushing. It's all good. Hello, hello. Lots of hello. Excellent. We also have realized that it's helpful to be able to, with this backward planning of where are we going to end up at the through this process, how does that link to the ongoing implementation and monitoring work? What does the strategic plan look like? How will we use it? And the answer to that is different for every organization. But what we wanted to do is we found, Kathy and I have been looking at some samples that she thought might be useful for us to share. Is this a good time for me to turn to that, Kathy?
Yes, please.
Sam's like, yes, please show me where we're going. This is an example of the two levels of strategy. If we think of it as a scaffolding, I think you called it in our earlier discussion, is really setting a structure or a framework for decisions over the 3-year time period. The priority level are those areas of work where we will most focus our energy for change, innovation, adjustment, learning, to be able to advance our mission in the coming years. So for this sample organization, they chose economic vitality, which is where their programming work happens, supported by 3 more organizational or operational priorities of strong leadership, strong organization, and strong financials. So you can see the priorities are really big buckets and broadly stated. And then the strategic plan also, includes for each of those priorities, a small number of goals that will unfold over 3 years. And goal statements start with a verb, and they are meant to give space for adaptation over the 3-year time frame, but they're meant to be specific enough that you can see the work and the results that we're aiming for. When we talk about SMART goals, that often comes up, the very quantitative or specific, time specific, and then who's doing what, comes in using this kind of framework and structure in objectives that are in those annual work plans that Kathy talked about, that help us know what are the steps or actions that we'll take to get these goals to happen. One of the things that we remember is that when we set a plan for 3 years, you can't start on everything at once because you'll just explode. And so part of what you do is think about pacing and phasing, and that if we tried to lay out every step for 3 years, we know that within a few months, we're going to be wrong because the world is going to change. And so instead, what we do is try to set that arc of the long-term direction that we're headed for within the context of the whole. And so, though this is the heart of the strategic plan, the work that we're doing around the blue boxes, all of those foundational statements, who we are, where we're headed, what difference we're aiming to make, and the vision that we want to talk about together today. You're really strong and solid on your mission and your values. We also want to get alignment on the vision of where we're headed. And so that context is really important to be able to come together with what often becomes kind of a checklist. If you just have a checklist and you check things off or don't, you don't have the context of the bigger picture. So that's why we're building both of those parts together. So this helps you see what some of the priorities and goals are, kind of the way of thinking about language, level of detail, level of specificity, and decision making. Kathy, anything else that stood out to you as you saw this that refers and helps us think in this situation?
I wonder if you could make this bigger. It's kind of tiny. I think everybody's leaning forward a little bit.
Sorry, I'm working from one screen,
No, I
so
know.
I'm having
I
a
can
really
never
hard
tell.
time getting to all the right places. There it is. I've unpacked it.
Great.
That's better.
So this is an example of the end result of the work that this committee will do, creating these kinds of goals, right? It'll be picking categories, priorities, and then setting goals. So I think we can send this around so folks can look at it more in detail. And we can, of course, tweak the way the goals come out in the way that is really most useful for us. But this is, I think, at the request of this group, and I think wisely, just looking at kind of the kinds of things we're sort of aiming for in relationship to our thing. So obviously, this is an example from some other organization, but is there any questions people have about this or comments or?
Sam, please.
There we go.
So my understanding is like the committees will kind of bring their thoughts of the priorities. The work groups, gosh.
Yeah.
The work groups are gonna bring kind of like their ideas of what the priorities are.
Mhm.
And then our job as the strategic plan committee will to be then take those priorities that they're seeing, kind of like get through those and then kind of create these specific goals
I think
from,
the working group work will actually come in at the goal level. And
Okay.
also through that work, we've already got a lot of good content for the annual objectives. And we
Mhm.
gather all of those up. And so we won't lose any of the good ideas.
Mhm.
What actually goes into the strategic plan will be at the priority and goal level, but then we'll have all those objectives, which will be the building blocks to create that first year's work plan. And we'll set that up together too, so that you've got a tool that brings it alive. Does that help, Sam? Can you kind of imagine and envision how that'll work? Yeah, because the priorities are so high level, and I don't anticipate, we don't have to assume at this point that the topic of each working group becomes a priority, because there's so much connection across them. And so what we want to do is, dive into some of those questions, see where it takes us, and be open to organically seeing what emerges as kind of the most important areas, how they hold together. Because one thing that I think helps make a plan really effective is that it cuts across the organization. So sometimes you see plans that are really functional, and each department or part of the organization has their own little spot. But what can be even more effective is when you find ways to connect across the organization, and that really helps people working together. So we'll see what emerges for us. And we'll create a tool. One of the things that Kathy asked me to do is based on our conversation today and the beginning work with the working groups, is to create a kind of template of what will be coming out of the working group, so that you have a tool and a method to be able to see how the work will come together and the results we're aiming for.
Yep. So the next step of this is for us to think about, as we know that our work is to kind of bring these priorities together. What do we need from the working groups and also you can think of it in couple ways, couple hats. What do we need from the working groups what standard information do we need to bring back so we can do this work? So what's going on here? Oh, I see. There we go.
So I just wanted to make sure, for those who aren't part of the working group discussions, we see where we've created working groups in these 4 areas. The strategic planning committee brings all those pieces together. And to Kathy's question, what do we as a strategic planning committee want and need to come from each of the 4 working groups to be able to do our kind of integration together? And if you have thoughts about what that guidance would be, wearing your strategic planning committee hat, this would be a great time to think about that together. Any hopes, requests, concerns? Yeah, Charlotte.
Just a quick question. Would it be possible to describe what the working group doing community belonging, what the scope of their work is? I mean, I feel like fund development, business strategy, and facilities and property is really self-explanatory. But community belonging can be pretty broad. And so it would be helpful to me if we could recap that, because I'm sure we talked about it, but just a refresher.
Yep, Kathy, you want to talk about that a bit, or?
Oh, I thought you were
I
pulling
could
up the.
also, yeah,
Okay.
I am, but I can, just because I didn't want to go. The charge from that working group is to intentionally deepen belonging across the beloved community, including staff, board, campers, alumni, and beyond, sorry. And the sample of the 4 questions or issues that are most important for that group to focus on are around Episcopal identity and religious practice, and adjusting that balance, knowing that there's no one final right answer of balance, but how we continue on an ongoing basis to think about Episcopal identity, to think and address radical accessibility, welcome, and inclusion in various different aspects. The 3rd is around safe and equitable work environment, and the 4th fourth is fostering lifelong connection with camp.
Mm.
Clearly, those connect in many ways, both within the group and across the groups. Does that help, Charlotte?
Yeah, it's great. It's
Yeah.
broad because it is broad.
Mhm.
What there, right? Right. And that emerged from the retreat because, we were all there seeing and hearing how across all the different analyses, the belonging was the connecting factor. So we wanted to make sure we had a space to attend to those. And KC is lead on that group.
Mm.
Great. Other questions or thoughts, hopes, requests?
I think the
Anything?
if you have a thought about like what would be useful information like that could like go into this tool for you for the working group leaders that would be like help us say, okay, from all the working groups about whatever topic they're discussing, what's the kind of information we want to receive? Like that's the kind of I guess information that we're looking for.
In my mind, when I'm thinking about it, like having, I'm thinking about how it's tricky because obviously I'm not going to be on every single working group, but I am like curious about what is like discussed in the working groups to get them to whatever goals they have, like in a way of like, I don't know, because like sometimes just the specific goals doesn't have like the nuance of everything that they were considering or thinking about. So I'm like, how do we get a snapshot of like what was discussed without us like necessarily being in every working group, right?
Mhm.
So what I hear there is creating tools. Hi, Melissa, glad you're here. To be able to get notes, and we'll have, shared folders where we can look at notes, but that's also a lot to be able to review 13 meetings worth of conversations. And so what we'll do is find ways for this committee to get the high level results, but also know that you can click another level deeper to be able to get a little bit more of that nuance. We don't want to lose that richness. Another part of the beauty of the design is having this distributed connection to the working groups, is that you as human beings will be part of the discussions. And even if you're not in all of them, one of your colleagues is. And so you're each carrying that nuance into your implementation. So we'll have both documented recording of the great ideas and the lived experience of having been part of those conversations. So we can do both on that. Great. Thanks, Sam. Any other hopes, requests?
I think that will be helpful in keeping our group focused on like making those goals too, that if they know that the things that come up, the great ideas that they bubble up with have a place. And when we're doing operational planning, we'll be able to refer to those things. That can almost like a parking lot sort of help
Mhm.
them
Mhm.
know that it's
Mhm.
going somewhere, not go floating in the ether.
Exactly. Yeah. Melissa, we're at the point in the agenda where we're just wrapping up a discussion of the kind of on the process perspective of what is strategic planning and what is our role. And we had some questions about what the working groups are working on. And our question to the group is what you as strategic planning committee guiding and integrating and leading the thinking part would be asking for from the working groups. And that's kind of what we're trying to ponder on together. Glad you're here.
Great, thank you. My apologies.
It's all good. You gave me like an hour heads up that you're stuck in traffic. So the beauty of LA.
We've
Yeah.
all been there.
Yep.
Beautiful.
And so I guess when the tool comes out for when you're having your meeting, please also feel free to give feedback about like if you see it and you're like, oh, this other thing could be good, that could be a really valuable thing to share with all of the working group folks. So feel free to continue to give feedback and get clarification. Charlotte's favorite. So, let's just make sure that the process is we keep on developing the process as we go to get to that goal point. So, yeah.
Hopefully. And I made a note that I will share, each of the working groups has been developing the charges and the list of questions they'll be working on. We've got input from the groups on how to structure the meetings. And so after today, we'll start calendaring that, and we'll be able to share that back with the strategic planning committee. So you all know, the questions and the specifics that each group is working through as you're either participating or looking forward to getting these results, or both. So should we turn to our content discussion for today, Kathy?
Sure, let's do it. We're right on
Does that feel
schedule.
complete? So I like to be able to include both a discussion about process and a chance to be able to think big picture and generatively in a strategic way around a key question. And as we developed and reviewed the questions from all of the work at the retreat, and I kind of hooked each of them to a working group, we found that there were several that are overarching and felt like a good fit to the strategic planning committee. And this first one is around our vision for Camp Stevens through the next 3 years, but even beyond, because the kind of work we're talking about here will live beyond 3 years. And so though the plan itself might articulate for 3 years, it is grounded in something that goes beyond that. So Kathy, do you want to give some context on this piece?
Sure. I think the first part of it is a little bit visiony, so just kind of get in that mode, that feeling. Thinking about what the overall vision is for our space is one way to kind of look at creating vision as well, because a lot of our work is about sort of not just programs, but the physical space that we have is a very special thing about our work. So we were talking today about, there's a comment on one of the worksheets about rustic or sketchy, like when does it go over the edge to being not great, but we want to be rustic. But they were talking about it's actually is kind of a big spectrum, because now that we have such a variety of facilities and there's just a variety of ways of providing programs and things like that. We said it's more of a spectrum than a binary, which felt very appropriate for our world today. So and I like to just remember that throughout the years, Peter was really invested in things being beautiful when we built them. And so thinking about that sort of baseline of like the interpretation of beauty. So thinking about like the vision of our space from the context of the actual space, but also what is the space like? What does it feel like? Maybe go from more a sensory experience. Oh, we got our things up here. So maybe having some conversation right now about what does that vision look like about our space, physical space, our communal space, and our missional space. So I know it might take a second to shift gears into that from our other graph situation. So take a moment.
Yep.
But we'd love to hear a conversation around space. Like you can just kick it off with anything simple or huge. Any of that would be great.
So reminding the retreat, the visuals and the notes are from the retreat notes, just to kind of connect back to conversations we've had so far about who we are and where we're headed. Any guidance? So definitely inform the working groups. Yeah, Gabby.
Something that's coming to mind for me is I was in a session with Simone Gamble from ORS at the National Conference for the ACA a couple years ago. And they were asking this question to the whole group of camp directors, is like, is camp a utopia or is camp a microcosm? Like, are we trying to like create perfection, and how is perfection rooted in white supremacy? Or are we trying to like experiment with a new way or like trial a different way of being? And can we acknowledge that the stuff from the world shows up in that place? So when I'm thinking about this space, that's just one of the things that I've been thinking about, is leaning away from this idea that at camp everything is perfect and we all belong perfectly, but more into this idea that we have this little piece of the planet and we get to experiment and try and collaborate and dig into what it means to be together.
I think to like piggyback off of that too, I've always like thought of when I think about the history of Camp Stevens and what we are today, I always like to think of us as like trying to like push the envelope of like what's accepted in the times. And they were like, Camp Stevens was radical in the 70s. And we want to be like radical in the 2024, you know, like of like acceptance and like equity and like, you know, like how can we be like, I think about that all the time of Camp Stevens of being like, I don't know, radical for our time, which means we can't stay stuck in the 70s and do exactly everything we did back then. Because it's a new time, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think about that a lot when I think of Camp Stevens. Is this the kind of stuff we're talking about, right?
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
We are now, so.
Yeah, we are.
And I can add to that too. I think that the idea of like radical visioning or like what Gabby said, kind of a different place to be or a different way of doing something, you know, from my world of facilities, it's like, and also like from the notes of, you know, sustainability and being like a model for fair housing and things like that. Like that is a radical departure, right, from most sorts of facilities. And so I think that that's kind of like one way that at least like in my working group that we could kind of orient ourselves toward that commitment. And also just as an observation, like when Gabby mentioned like perfectionism and white supremacy, like another characteristic is urgency. And I think urgency and beauty are often at odds with each other. And so, you know, I experience a lot of times where, you know, quick fixes are necessary, but like not beautiful. And so, yeah, that's just something I think to keep in mind. Like, how do we overcome like the need for urgent solutions or put ourselves in a position where, you know, we don't feel pressured and that we're able to do things that are beautiful.
Something that came up for me as I was thinking about this rustic, sketchy, all of the things that were being said was, which by the way, whoever wrote that on a sheet, I want to know, and I just want to like high five them, give them a hug because it's such a clear visual.
I'm pretty sure it was Mike Rook, and I'm pretty sure it was Greg Tuttle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It
Great.
is playful and yet clear. So there's that. But the word that kept coming up for me was nurturing. Because like when something is nurtured, then it has the possibility of being expansive. You are able to use ropes course language to go from like your safe zone to your stretch zone, because like you have everything you need. And I think that doesn't mean that, you know, you have the 500 percale sheet set on the bed. It means that you have that there's a thoughtfulness that's gone into the care of something, so that the people that are in the space and the space itself, the buildings itself, have been cared for in a way that it's able to do the next thing, not just be stuck where it is, but do the next thing because it's been nurtured.
Beautiful. Ariel, I wonder what you're thinking. And you can always say, I pass right now. I'm still pondering. Because I see the pondering.
Yeah, I'm thinking on the for whom part. And I'm a part of the community belonging side, but I guess I'm just like still thinking of that and just like what is it like folks were saying before, like Camp Stevens has always been a radical place, and I think I just wonder what it looks like to keep on pushing the envelope for like what does this mean, like who is Camp for, who has access to this space, who, gosh, I don't know. I guess I'm just still thinking about it, but
Yeah.
that's just where my mind's been on.
Yeah. Let's keep those thoughts going. Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
You just want to build on that or any other part of the prompts?
We always talk about like it being a peaceful place apart. And I like when I'm always trying to think, I don't know, the words of like relaxing and peaceful and like welcoming, like those sorts of things come to mind when thinking of Camp Stevens and like um how can we actually make that for who and everyone, like that sort of thing. Um, it's like, yeah, peaceful place apart is like something I say to people a lot. Maybe because I like it, it like resonates with me when I'm talking with people and describing Camp Stevens.
It was kind of the tagline for a while.
Right. I
For
think
some
it's
time.
obviously I've seen it around. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, what is,
Resonates.
yeah, that was our tagline. What is our tagline now? Or could it be?
I can say from the social media side that when I'm talking about like in the rest of the world it's X and at Camp Stevens it's Y, it's like instantly connects with people. And I don't need that, it doesn't need to be like a constant comparison, but there is something special, unique, different about this place and about places like this. um and I think people really connect to that on a like deep, like intuitive level, whether they've experienced it or they were just considering experiencing it, or considering it for their child. Um, like I'm thinking about like posts where I've talked about in the rest of the world, like we're trying to avoid boredom. At Camp Stevens, like boredom's an opportunity to explore a new trail, right? Or something like that, where we're like countercultural in a specific way, and we're also a different kind of space to like learn different things about yourself. And when it comes to like our marketing around what we are for youth, I think that resonates with parents a lot, and it resonates with kids a lot too. Um, they understand that their world is over programmed and overly like and stressful and stuff, and they're curious about what something simpler would be like, both parents and kids.
Thanks. Stephanie, what's bubbling for you? If anything you want to share, you say no.
I don't know that she heard you.
Are you stuck, Stephanie, with trying to find, I couldn't tell if you're trying to find your mute button. Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, my internet's going in and out, and I heard the second half of your sentence and I thought, oh no, did she say was her first word my name?
I know.
Don't ever let my question be an oh no, but it was your name. I'm just an invitation, not an expectation. Sorry about the internet.
No.
Just anything about this that's connecting for you, or anything that you'd want to kind of invite us to add in or explore at some point?
I've been thinking, looking over, I just met with we had our final meeting with the listening group.
Oh, wonderful.
And part of our conversation was noticing in some of the things that people wrote in or shared, and religion sort of an obvious example, that there are disparate opinions of what camp ought to be in people's minds, and that to make one group feel like they belong, perhaps the other group will not feel like they belong. Does that make sense? And especially like religion, right? Some people wrote like camp should be a place where we sing Jesus songs. And other people said, camp is already too religious. What are you doing? And so I think in the strategic plan, I have a question around, as we seek to be a place that centers belonging, that often I will hear Kathy talk about mission matches and figuring out what is our mission and what are those matches and how do we lean into those matches, knowing that necessarily that will mean that not everyone matches with this place. I don't know if that's helpful to this, but that was sort of a way our conversation was going with the listening group.
That's really interesting, Stephanie. And I think for me, it highlights like how many different things we do here and how that question of belonging and who belongs and who can be part of the space like looks a little different based on, you know, a retreat group has its own experience of camp that we're kind of supporting in this like spotter position kind of way. And then summer camp is this experience that we're like kind of almost 100% hands-on to, facilitating, making choices about. And then there are some things that we do that are somewhere in between. And so when we're talking about our vision for camp, it's going to be really important to make room in that for all those different types of ways that people interact with this space. And if we're coming from a lens of summer camp or a lens of retreats or a lens of whatever, it might leave out one of those other groups, or it might not fit into that experience of one of the other groups. So, yeah.
Yeah, that has even like what Stephanie's talking about is like, how can we find like the commonalities as this like strategic planning group of like, what can like all of those groups agree on? And as like the vision of Camp Stevens, and it's like, our job's not going to be like, we will sing more Jesus songs or we will not sing, but it'll be like making this place welcome for everyone or something like that. You know, that's how it's like, I'm like, ah, yes. Planning. I see.
I think this conversation is so interesting around what it means to belong and not to like fit. You know, fitting and belonging are these two separate things. And like maybe like when I think about the space, I think about a place that people can will know they'll know up front going in because we've been real about who we are and what we stand for, that they can know what to expect and that won't be a surprise. And maybe that's a vision, that's a way of engaging with us. And that maybe belonging doesn't mean being comfortable all the time. Maybe belonging means that you're coming to a place where you're going to grow. So I don't know. That's just something. I think it goes back to Gabby's point about utopia versus like a place where you can like try things out and do new things, meet new people, which, you know, if you look at historical reports about the things that changed campers across the world, you know, summer campers, is they met people they would never have met anywhere else. I think that's like the thing always sticks in my mind. And that's true for adults too here. But yeah, what does belonging mean to us? That's the kind of question.
Yeah, there's a very both and aspect to this. And I heard another voice. Gabby, please.
Oh, no, I was just reflecting on like very early on, I think it was Melissa in talking to staff said something like, you don't have to believe to belong. And that pressure coming off of me gave more of an opening for my own spiritual development than any of the pressure I had been dealing with my whole life, you know. That was more like, and so I think it's like, yeah, there's a lot of complicated conversations we're going to have around what it means to like hold this space. And like, I think what's happening here is really powerful. And if we can find a way to help people feel safe here while still being clear about who we are, then we'll be doing like Camp Stevens a lot of justice.
Wonderful. Melissa, your inspiration was named, so I'd love to hear kind of what you've been hearing and how it connects.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of thoughts. I'm going back to the rustic, sketchy, which I really love too. And the word that came to mind for me is like intentional, as being sort of the bridge between the two, or maybe the thing that keeps us rustic and not sketchy, is when we do things with intention. And when hospitality is done with intention, which I think camp does pretty well with. And I recently had the experience of being there just like for fun, not as a chaplain and not in my current role, and sort of seeing camp through the eyes of people who don't affiliate with any particular religious tradition, and just how welcome they felt and how much they felt like they belonged. So I also had been thinking about the for whom question, and thinking particularly about the people who aren't at camp. Who are those people? And I think this might sound harsh, but I think some of those people, maybe camp is not a good fit for them. Like, I mean, this is from my own personal history, but all the people who loved the camp that I went to as a kid would not love Camp Stevens. And so Camp Stevens doesn't need to be a place of belonging for them. But I feel like Camp Stevens does need to be a place of belonging for people who struggle to find belonging. And I also love the urgent versus doing things well and beautifully. I feel like a lot of what I do in my day-to-day job is fight the urgent anxiety that comes into my office pretty much daily, and how things go so much better when we slow down, work through a process, and work things collaboratively, and that like the solution always sort of bubbles up to the surface in a way. But when we're stuck in the anxiety of urgency, then we're going to take shortcuts and it's not going to go well. So I love that we're thinking about doing things well and beautifully and setting aside urgency. I have some thoughts about just to condense it into a very short phrase, the Jesus songs versus like not enough Jesus songs versus too many Jesus songs. And I have always felt like camp is very, even in the days when like I didn't feel particularly welcome as a chaplain, which was like my first couple years. It was a long time ago, and it was like pre-Kathy, I think, or in between Kathy. But I have always found Camp Stevens to be a place that teaches Christian and or spiritual values by the way that we work together, and less in like cramming it into people's heads. Like, okay, Jesus is this, so then we need to be this. But it's more like, oh, here's how we operate as a camp, which is very different than what a lot of people experience in their day-to-day lives. You know, I mean, just eating dinner together, family style. Bishop Taylor talks about how many, a teacher at one of our schools told him that like the vast majority of students at this school are eating dinner alone in their rooms. Like that itself. So this goes back to the countercultural thing too. And so I kind of think of camp as being sort of countercultural in terms of Christian camps as well. But what we're really doing is imbuing the values and the identity, and then kind of backfilling with, oh yeah, that's because this is who we are. This is what it means to be a person of faith, or to have this kind of spiritual life as our operating system, so to speak. So anyway, I think that's it for my thoughts. That was a lot.
Wonderful. So one of the other white supremacy attributes I always struggle with is about the kind of the being so driven by time and timeliness, and the role that I play as a facilitator in honoring the time that you've set aside for this conversation. So the way I like to balance that is, if we were in a room together, I'd stick around in the hallway to chat with you afterward, or at camp, go for a walk on a trail. So I like to stay in the meeting room afterward. And if you have more that you'd like to kind of process together, I'll be around to do that. But I also think it's really important to respect the timing that we've set aside for each other. One of the things we might consider with this group is whether we move to 90-minute meetings. I know that Camp Stevens loves 1-hour meetings, and you do a great job with them. So Kathy, I think we're at the place where we turn to our last item, knowing that there's so much more on all of these topics that we can and will explore together. But we wanted to just close with a little bit of a connection to the process and making some space for reflection. So Kathy, please.
Yeah. Over the next month or so, we'll have the working groups get together for their initial meeting. Each group has its own structure and number of meetings. So if you're part of a working group, and so those of you who are here are mostly leading working groups, please take a look at that information. And Elizabeth has sent out a survey to all you folks so that the strategic planning consulting group can support you. So Molly and Elizabeth can support you as a facilitator to make sure you don't have, you can kind of get into that role and then get what you need as far as planning and logistics goes. So make sure that that survey gets complete and that you get in there and get the meeting started with your group. Also, that tool will come out, and I'm sure in conversation with Elizabeth, you'll receive that. Those of you who are not part of working groups that are here, I think those folders will start filling up. So I'll probably send out, I'll talk with Elizabeth about this, but it's just a heads up as information is starting to go into the folders. You can start reviewing that information if you'd like, things like that. So those are all things you can be doing, and also think about some of these questions we've been asking today. Next is refining the process in the calendar. Can you remind me of that?
Just knowing that we stay flexible. So the calendar that we've laid out here has an arc toward adopting the plan in September, and we are committed to I just love this conversation about making the space to do it well and beautifully. So it's our intention for this arc to happen. And as we live into it, we'll stay flexible.
No. Okay, great. But right now that's our plan. So we're going to do our best to make it happen. So great. Any questions before we move out of this meeting and into the next phase? Okay.
So we filled out this might be more working group specific, but should I wait and ask it afterward?
We got your input, and after today, we are following up with you about designing based on that design. But your input. So thank you. Everybody here has done that. I really appreciate that.
You've done all your job so far. It's great. Cool. All right. Well, I wanted to close with just a little a closing a prayer for us as a group. Give us new strength so that we may build places of belonging, to create a community for all to share their gifts, to know each other, and that each of us is loved, to help us see the light of love in all that we serve. Amen. Thank you. All right, everybody, let's go forth and do some great work. And thanks for being here today. All right. Carpool duty. All right. Excellent. All right. If anyone would want to hang out,
Thanks,
please do. Thanks, everyone.
I just want to say that under the umbrella of taking the time to do it well and beautifully, I'd be happy to do 90-minute meetings. So whatever is required, just on my end.
Thank you.
And I'm not in a working group. Is that right? I mean, this is my working group.
This is your group. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
You missed the meeting. You missed 4 meetings. No.
No, you're good.
I actually texted someone this morning, like, they wrote me like, is this how you prefer to communicate, and I was like, yes, did I miss a meeting? Constantly afraid of that.
Oh, you're good.
Anyway, it's great to see you all.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
all.
you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
And
Bye.
Gabby, to follow up on those next steps, we want to map out the input that we got from everyone about how many meetings and how long, and then maybe offer a calendar. And
Okay.
then with each of the leads, look at your calendars and the people that you're working with and figure out when we'd start populating those through June.
Cool.
Does that feel okay?
Yeah, I can see my calendar, so we're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun. It's
That's
like a puzzle.
okay. Okay, it is a puzzle.
Yeah, right.
All right,
A
cool.
good
Thanks, y'all.
puzzle. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Do we not want to